Hello, ambitious and motivated listeners. Today on the AM podcast, I interview Kevin Beist, Artistic Director of ArtPrize.org. He talks forcing an action to get a reaction for creative workflow and finding creative solutions within real-world constraints. This is the AM show with arts music lawyer, where ambition and motivation meet persistence and drive, where your wildest dreams come true and even the greatest possibilities become realities. Listen to people just like you who stay authentic to who they are and master the art of their craft. Are you sharing the art of you? The art of you is music to my ears. Stay focused, stay on track. Create a new lifestyle with ambition and motivation. The AM Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the AM Show. Today I have Kevin from ArtPrize, who I'm going to let explain everything there is to know about this amazing artistic development going on in Grand Rapids. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So let's just dive right in. Explain to everybody what is ArtPrize and who is Kevin.
ArtPrize is an annual competition and festival that happens for 2.5 weeks every fall in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This year, it starts in 2 weeks from the day we're recording this. It starts on September 19, and this will be the 10th ArtPrize. So we've been doing this annually for 10 years. ArtPrize is unique in a lot of ways, and it's really big in a lot of ways, and so it's based on an open call for artists, which is not uncommon, but ArtPrize is unique in that there's an open call both for artists, but also for the venue spaces that host the artwork. So every year, starting in March, we do an open call process for any space in downtown Grand Rapids to be an ArtPrize venue. And ArtPrize venues can be anything from things you'd expect, like museums and art galleries, and other cultural institutions, but also businesses, church lobbies, restaurants, bars, city parks, an unused warehouse space. Really anywhere that can safely hold art and hold people can sign up and volunteer their space as an ArtPrize venue. So on a typical year, we have around 160 to 180 venue spaces all throughout downtown Grand Rapids. Following that, there's an open call for artists. So artists sign up to be a part of ArtPrize from all over the world, and they register on artprize.org on our website between April and June. And then we have a process whereby the artists and venues connect with one another on our website. And so for the most part, the ArtPrize organization is not curating the ArtPrize exhibition. It's actually up to the individual artists and venues to choose which one they want to work with. And so the best analogy is probably that the ArtPrize website at that time of the calendar works kind of like a dating website, where they're like, venues have profiles, artists have profiles, and they can view one another, and they can say like, hey, I have this and this work, I'm looking for this kind of space. The artist, the venue can say like, okay, yeah, you can hang that here, or you can install that in our space. And so there's this sort of agreement and negotiation process that happens. And then once that all completes about at the end of June, and then at that point we know who's going to be in ArtPrize that year. And so that's kind of how the show comes together. So that's the very basic bit of what ArtPrize is. There's a lot more to it than that. And then the other thing is, of course, the prizes, which I should also mention. That's another basic part of it. So we give away $500,000 in prizes every year, and half of that is determined by public vote, and half of it is determined by expert jury. So there are actually 2 grand prizes, and they're each worth $200,000. So there's a public vote grand prize for $200,000, and there's a juried grand prize for $200,000. And then the rest of that, the final $100,000, is made up of a set of smaller juried awards based on category and smaller public vote awards also based on several broad categories. And then so the voting and the jurying process during the 2.5-week event they each happen in 2 phases. So there's a midpoint in the event when it's been narrowed down to a field of 20 juried finalists and 20 public vote finalists. And then there's kind of a second round of voting and a second round of jurying where the big winners are determined.
Very interesting. So let's dial it back a notch.
who came up with this idea for ArtPrize, and how did the process begin?
Yeah, so I've been with ArtPrize since the very beginning. So I was there nearly 10 years ago, nine and a half years ago now. So ArtPrize was the idea of a local philanthropist by the name of Rick DeVos. And he came up with the idea for it. There's just the sort of basic kernel of the idea which was that any place in downtown could be a venue to host artwork. Anyone from the world could be an artist. Anybody who shows up can vote on the winner. And that was sort of the basic idea. And so I was a part of that original team that kind of figured out how to turn that idea into a reality. And yeah, and so there, and we got some generous kind of seed funding to start out. But once ArtPrize became established, then we, sort of turned it from an experiment. Because in the first year, it really was very much an experiment. It was like, would this even work? And this is a strange idea, but let's just sort of see if it sticks. Kind of, there's sort of this mentality to it. But once the first year was even more successful than we anticipated, there was more artists than we thought there'd be. There was a lot more crowds than we thought there'd be. And it became clear that we sort of struck a nerve, and it kind of became this phenomenon. So following that first year, we really set to work in figuring out how to turn this experiment into an institution, and how to fundraise from a really broad range of sources so that we could ensure its sustainability, and then also incorporate as a nonprofit and kind of run the programming in a mission-driven and sustainable way. So and it's evolved over time. Like as I talked about, that original kernel of the idea that didn't include the juried awards, and that was something that we added a little bit later. And there was sort of there's a couple of stages to how we sort of phase that into the current model of having public vote and juried awards be on equal footing. But it's a very adaptable. It's been a very adaptable organization the whole time, and I think that part of having this experimentation in the DNA of it from the very beginning has meant that we're able to pivot quickly when we need to. And so like the shift to those juried awards is a really key example of that.
So how did you get involved with ArtPrize? What were you doing immediately before?
Yeah, good question. That was a long time ago now because I've been here for so long. So I had two jobs before ArtPrize started, and one was that's the same guy who founded ArtPrize, Rick. He started a company, and you got to remember this is back in 2007 to 8. He had this like tech startup that was like a sort of early social network that was based on movies and based on movie recommendations. This is before Netflix had a recommendation algorithm, and before Facebook. I mean, Facebook existed, but it was really small. And this was like it seems like it's like ancient history. But at the time, it seemed like there was a lot of possibility to sort of like create a new social network. Anyway, and so this was all about like for movie lovers and movie recommendations and things like that. It didn't work, and it got sold, and it doesn't exist anymore. But I was a part of that in the sense that I was on the editorial side of it. So I was writing for their blog and then producing a podcast, actually, mostly about independent film. And so traveling to film festivals and stuff like that. But I was doing that part-time. And then the other part of the time, I was running a small university art gallery in downtown Grand Rapids. So I was doing sort of like visiting a lot of film festivals and seeing how like large events like that operated. And then I was also, running exhibitions, like, running this sort of exhibition calendar in this space where I would install a new show every month and promote an opening and, some student work and some stuff that we curated in. So I kind of saw like the sort of, international large scale event production. I had some, knowledge of that, at least from experiencing those events, film festivals in particular, but then also, had worked in exhibitions locally and with artists and with, promoting art events. So that's what I was doing. And then, there was this point of transition where the entire team that had been working on that startup, it was clear that it didn't really take, and it was being kind of like, sold off and shut down basically. But we had this whole team of people who had built that, and Rick had this idea for ArtPrize. And so he thought like, well, let's just give it a shot. And maybe this will just be like, you know, a few more months of work for people to just try this thing out, and maybe it'll just flop, but it's at least like worth giving it a shot. And so that whole team was kind of already assembled, and then we just kind of repurposed to create ArtPrize.
Nice. The reason I wanted to ask you what you were doing immediately before is because many times I feel like artists find themselves between a rock and a hard place, and questioning whether they should pursue more of a career as opposed to art, which for many people is just a hobby. And
Yeah.
by highlighting your experiences in the artistic field, I feel like you're giving artists out there an opportunity at the very least to see and to imagine the type of role that they could also fit themselves into. Could you expand a little bit on the opportunities available to people in the artistic space?
Yeah, definitely. I'm an artist myself, and in undergrad I studied studio art, and I don't make work as much as I used to, just because I'm kind of too busy. But that instinct is still very much there. But I don't know if I've ever had a job, like a real job, that I applied for. Like any job I've had is like, it's come from some opportunity, and it's come from sort of knowing the people who are forming something as it's forming. Like even that gallery job, that gallery didn't really exist before. Like I was there as it was like coming together. I was graduating, and then I like was able to like be a part of, you know, advocating for the creation of that position. And so I think that you know, that's an important way of doing things, because if you can take the risk to like start growing something from the ground up. And I think artists are good at that, because, you know, you're practiced at like dealing with a set of constraints, but for the most part, it's just a blank, you know, to overuse a metaphor, it's like the blank canvas, right? But there's never totally blank. There's a set of constraints, and you're sort of approaching that set of constraints with how can you come up with creative solutions to work within that. And so, you know, like when I moved into my first initial role with ArtPrize when it first started, like I said, I was just sort of there. So there's a bit of luck to that. Like, I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, you know, they didn't like go around interviewing a ton of people to figure out like who's the best person to write the artist rules and answer artist emails and, you know, like do the stuff that I did that first year. But even if they had searched for it, I think that a lot of people that I know working in the arts wouldn't have wanted to do it. And the reason is because it seemed kind of crazy, and it was sort of risky. And a lot of the ways that we were doing things, like with a giant public vote prize, it was just sort of like it's not how it's supposed to work. It was in a sense sort of wrong. Like there was an established way that things are supposed to work, and it just didn't. Like it sort of bucked a lot of that stuff intentionally. And that's what I really liked about it. And the inspiration that I took for operating in that way, that inspiration came from artists, and it came from my favorite artists. And I had this professor back in undergrad who, when he talked about Andy Warhol, he would say that Andy would do things perfectly wrong. And so, like, you know, and I could, you know, you can go on and on and on about like what that means, but like he would make like just sort of a simple gesture and kind of a dumb gesture, but he would do it in just the right way. And that's kind of, you know, and he's not the only artist to do that, who sort of like very carefully does something in like the worst way possible, or like the deliberately incorrect way. And so there was always this kind of the sensibility about ArtPrize that I really liked. I really liked that about it. And so I think that when people are thinking about careers and thinking about opportunities, I think that people look at the structures and systems that are currently in place, and they try to figure out how do I just sort of like become a part of that structure, or kind of, you know, slowly work my way up through that structure. And that's fine. And like, I'm not dissing that. I'm not dissing like, you know, becoming the sort of junior curatorial assistant and then, like inching your way up, like that's totally fine. But I think that people much less often try to think about like, what's the whole system and what can be done. What's a new thing that you could do that sort of deliberately defies that system? I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but I don't know. There are other ways of operating, and sometimes there can be incredible opportunities that can be easy to miss because they're not opportunities to like skip the line and get to the top of the hierarchy that you're kind of, coveting. Instead, they're ways of just going in the opposite direction or building something in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes total sense. And I think that what you insinuated a little bit is that taking the risk to become a part of something that is in an inception phase also lends itself to a lot of opportunity for growth, because essentially you're working with a blank canvas with the opportunity to be very creative in your own artistic right.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer, like I try not to get into like big arguments about like what is art and what isn't art, because I'm I love conceptual art and I love all sorts of art. And so like I really do think that there's ways that you can apply artist thinking to systems, into bureaucracies, into to sort of other methods of being in the world, and into politics, into activism, into like there's so much that I think that you can sort of apply this sort of way of creating something, testing it, reacting to it, letting other people react to it, revising it, creating something else. There's this sort of iterative way that artists can make and remake things. And I think that that can be applied to all sorts of systems and processes. And so even though I don't like do that much drawing anymore, I do, I think about, how our organization's structured, and, why should artists making objects be the ones to do all the creative experimentation when, people designing organizations and systems, like they should be operating as artists too.
I really love that explanation, actually, because I think you expand on what it really means to be an artist, not necessarily in the traditional way that people think of artists, such as music or painting or sculpting. So I really love that you touched on that. So getting back to ArtPrize and these artists who actually want to submit their manifested work, such as a sculpture or a painting or something like that. How does an artist go about submitting their work? Does it have to be selected by the sponsor? What is the process for getting your work of art into an exhibitor's space?
Yeah. So the process is we run open call artist registration in the spring of ArtPrize years, and it runs from kind of mid-April to early June. And there's a registration fee of $50, but you can go on the ArtPrize website, artprize.org, and register, upload images of your work, description of your work, some more information about the space that you need. And then you can begin that process of looking through the different ArtPrize venues and requesting connections for venues that you think would be a good fit for your work. And so oftentimes what artists will do is they'll make several requests to several different places that they think could work to host their artwork. And then the venues at the same time are reviewing those connection requests as they come in. And so they'll say like, no, or maybe, or tell me more about that, or, how is that thing going to be hung? And then it sort of begins this negotiation process. And then ultimately the artists need to pick a single location. And then they need to finalize with a written contract with the venue of where they're going to show. So that happens. So for the last 10 years, that's happened every spring. That actually won't be happening in 2019 because the thing I didn't mention yet is that we're in the midst of this interesting transition with ArtPrize where ArtPrize is shifting, the competition is shifting to a biennial schedule. So we're doing ArtPrize in 2 weeks, but the next ArtPrize competition after that will be in the fall of 2020. So that artist registration and connection process will happen again in the spring of 2020. In 2019, we're introducing a new exhibition format, which we're calling Project One. And Project One is going to be a break from the ArtPrize competition, and instead we're going to shift to a year where we do public art commissions instead of competition. And so the resources that we normally give away as prizes as part of the competition, instead we're going to be giving those resources to just a really small number of artists, probably like 3 to 5. But those artists will be commissioned to do really large-scale, interactive, spectacular public art projects in downtown Grand Rapids. And it will actually run longer than ArtPrize. It'll run for about 2 months instead of 2.5 weeks. So it'll run for September and October of 2019. And so we just announced that shift like 2 months ago, and we're still in the midst of planning Project One and what that's going to look like. And so we're planning to announce in early 2019 who those artists are and a bit more about what that is going to look like. But going forward, ArtPrize, the competition, is going to happen every other year on even numbered years. So 2018, 2020, and 2022. And then the intervening years will be what we call project years. And so the first one's Project One, the next one will be Project Two, following Project Three.
Well, that sounds like a really great opportunity for artists to really put themselves out there, maybe for an extended period of time beyond what ArtPrize typically lasts.
Yeah.
About some of the most interesting, amazing pieces that you have personally seen in your years of ArtPrize experience, and maybe some of them could include past winners.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many. One that was not a winner, but that I really loved the first year is this artist by the name of Kurt Perschke, and he did this thing called the Red Ball Project. And he's done this all over the world, actually, and he might still be touring it around. But he created this enormous inflatable red ball that was, I don't know, 12 or 15 feet in diameter. So like this really, really big ball. And then he would find multiple locations around the city where the ball could be inflated and then like wedged into the architecture of a space. And so it would be like between two buildings or like in a walkway or, in an alley, like kind of wedged in an interesting way. And so each day it would be in a different location and there would just be this enormous red ball like wedged somewhere. So I really love that project. That was from the first year. One of my favorite winners was a juried grand prize winner from 2015. This artist based in Brooklyn by the name of Kate Gilmore. And she did an installation at this venue called Site Lab. And Site Lab is a very interesting local kind of all volunteer run art nonprofit. And they take over different unused spaces, like unused buildings, and then they do temporary art installations. And so they do a venue at ArtPrize pretty much every year, but they also do additional programming on their own. That's not a part of ArtPrize other times of the year. But for this year, they had worked with Habitat for Humanity and gotten permission to use like almost a whole block worth of houses and other buildings. And so they were able to give several artists entire abandoned houses to transform into artworks. And so Kate Gilmore got like this entire 2-story house. And so she painted the outside cotton candy pink, and she took out all the windows and then painted the inside completely red. And then in each window, she hung a swing. And then she got these volunteer performers to sign up in shifts. So, and they were all women, and these women had to wear a certain white dress and red shoes. And then the women would swing during the performance times, so their feet would like pop out the windows. Even on the second floor, you would see these like feet popping out the windows. And it was incredible. It was totally magical and really amazing. And it won the top juried prize that year. That's probably one of my favorite ones. I know it's I mean, I can't really pick favorites because, you know, I have to be impartial, and I love them all. Another one that I think is great that I'll mention quickly is in 2014, we had an interesting thing where, well, two really strange things happened in the same year. It was sort of like lightning striking twice. One was that the grand prize jury insisted on giving a tie. So there's actually two works that split the jury grand prize, but one of those two works also won the public vote grand prize. And so that was the only time that one piece has won both the jury grand prize and the public vote grand prize. And that was a piece called Intersections by this artist named Anila Kayum Agha. You know what? I have a picture of it right here. This is so perfect. So I'll just show you. So this is a magazine that we made last year. Can you see? Okay, so this is like Anila's piece is this huge, by huge I mean like 7-foot cube, which has an intricate pattern cut in it, and it has a light bulb in the middle, and it hangs in the middle of a gallery space, and then projects this shadow onto the wall and floor and ceiling of the space. It's kind of hard to see. Anyway, if you look up her work, so that was a really amazing piece, and it was fun to see something that sort of captured the jurors' attention equally as much as the public attention. And you know, and she's gone on to do great stuff, and is a good friend. So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch more, but those are the ones that come to mind right now.
You know, 2 questions. What do you think is in it for these artists in submitting their work? Why would an artist want to submit their work? And also, something that I think is so important is I want to know how this ArtPrize competition has affected the Grand Rapids community or even artistic community at large.
Yeah, why enter? Well, so, you know, it's funny because like there's prizes, and the prizes are there as this giant carrot on a stick as the sort of motivation for all this stuff to happen. But we actually do surveys of artists to get feedback, and we ask them, like, what's your top reason for entering? And winning a prize isn't the most popular reason for entering. People are more motivated by the size of the crowds. We get typically about 500,000 visitors over 19 days, which on a per day basis makes it one of the most attended art events anywhere in the world. And so there's just this enormous influx of people. And so for some artists, just sort of like being able to connect with audiences and, you know, show their work to that broad of an audience and talk about it, that has a lot of value. Some artists are interested in sales. You know, ArtPrize is not really a commercial event. It's not an art fair. We don't take commissions on sales, but some artists take it quite seriously, and they do want to sell their work. And so if that's what they want to do, they can. And so a lot of artists successfully sell work. So that's a motivating factor. And then a lot of other artists, you know, talk about not only the quantity of the crowds, but sort of who's coming in. So there's press, and there's curators, and there's other artists. And so it's this way of kind of making connections and meeting a lot of people as well. So that was your first question. Your second question was about the impact. I mean, the impact locally, it's weird because it's, you know, we've been doing this, you know, this is the 10th year. And so it's become such a signature event that, yeah, it's like, you know, and local artists find ways of, you know, of using it to their advantage, or like working around it, or, you know, like there's just a bunch of different kind of strategies that the local creative community has toward, you know, supporting the event or finding ways to make the event support their practice. And so there's a bunch of different sort of strategies with that, but it's such a behemoth that it's kind of like, it's one of those things where it's a little hard to imagine Grand Rapids without it, because it's just become this kind of signature rhythm of the fall.
Do you see it maybe affecting families where now it's become, you know, a ritual every year that as a family, I'm going to take my kids, kind of like picking strawberries or, you know, apple picking, you know,
Yeah.
like a seasonal activity? Do you see that families are gathering to make ArtPrize a destination for that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely like a sort of local fall seasonal activity. It's like donuts and cider and apples and ArtPrize, because it's like this fall thing. So yeah, we definitely see a lot of that, which is fun. The other thing that's interesting that we noticed a couple years ago is like, if you just search Twitter for mentions of ArtPrize, just from like random accounts, there's a lot of like what I think are teenagers or people in their early 20s tweeting about going on dates to ArtPrize. It's like it's like a date destination. And I think I know why, because it's like, it's free and it's sort of cultured. Like you can be like, you just find a place to park and like walk around and you can talk and be like, hey, we looked at art, and it sort of seems cool and sophisticated to be like, we're going downtown and we're looking at art. And so we've dubbed that date prize. Like it's the sort of the phenomenon of, and like, if you, and it won't be as much now because it's like, ArtPrize isn't happening yet, but in a few weeks once it gets going, if you just search Twitter for ArtPrize, some of the mentions will be like, had so much fun with my whatever, with my girlfriend at ArtPrize. But then a lot of it will be like people, there's like this class of tweet where it's like girls in particular, like saying how much they wish someone would take them to ArtPrize. Like, I wish somebody would take me to ArtPrize. That would be so romantic. Like it's like this idea that they just thought of, which, so it's a tradition for families, but also for all members of the community.
Where do you see ArtPrize headed? I mean, is this something that you hope other cities will mimic, or does ArtPrize hope to expand to make this maybe like a franchise type model within the nonprofit model?
Yeah, we get a lot of inquiries from other cities about like, what would it take to do this in our city, and we've fielded those inquiries with varying levels of serious talks and plans. And at one point we were talking with a lot of people in Dallas because they were pretty interested in doing something similar. They actually raised some money and got a ways into it, but then it kind of like didn't quite fit into their overall arts plan for the city, and so it didn't end up happening. There's a group currently in Phoenix that's working toward doing something similar to ArtPrize and working on raising money and organizing. And so we're offering some advice on that. For the time being, we're not thinking about like actually franchising the brand or the voting technology or anything like that. But it's there's been a lot of interest, and there's been people who have kind of imitated it in one way or another. At various times. I mean, the future for us is, the big thing is this shift to a biennial format and the commissioned approach with Project One. And we're really excited about that because it really, one thing that we've developed over the past few years in ArtPrize is this suite of grant programs. And even though artists obviously are motivated by the possibility of these large cash prizes, that still doesn't really act as a replacement for having the funding to do a really ambitious project up front. Because a lot of like the most, like ambitious public outdoor work has like a lot of material and labor and design costs that just sort of have to be taken care of in order for really cool stuff to happen. And so we've sort of, been ramping up the granting portion of what we do, and we give away, I don't know how much, like close to $300,000 in grants every year. And that's before any prizes go out. So the thing with Project One is it's like this kind of shift into doubling down on that granting procedure. So, and the possibilities of what we can do there. Because with the grants within an ArtPrize competition year, we're a little bit limited because in the end of the day, we have to run a fair competition. We know we're the referees after all. Like it has to be pretty much an even playing field for all the people who are competing for those prizes, because it's a lot of money on the line. But for Project One, we're able to shift our role into being a collaborator along with artists. And so we can start talking with artists much earlier and say like, what resources can we provide and what expertise can we provide, and how can we use this city as a canvas to do something really incredible, and how can we work together to engage and motivate public involvement in ways, in new ways, in ways that are beyond the vote, or beyond the public vote.
Well, that leads me into my next question, that in the process of motivation and keeping things going and inspiring new ideas for where ArtPrize is going, or even you yourself as an artist, what advice do you have for other artists that might be watching who need those words of inspiration because they feel stuck? They feel like they're in a rut. Maybe nobody's paying attention to them. Tell them something motivating and inspirational.
Man, I'm in a rut half the time. So, you know, I think that like, when I feel like I need motivation, the thing that I tend to do, my strategy is that I sort of, I force myself to take an action that will cause a reaction. And then once that, then I will then have to react to that reaction. That makes sense. I almost think about it like tipping a first domino. Like if you tip the first domino, it just like starts to fall. And sometimes it's, and then once the process is like up and going, then you're like, okay. And I know that's very abstract, but it's like, you know, sometimes it's just sort of like sending this email to start a conversation with someone, or, you know, like putting this idea out there, or starting a conversation, or inviting somebody to coffee. And it's like, that's kind of like, can be a scary thing to do sometimes. And you're like, I'm not sure what they're going to think or what they're going to say, or I have this idea, I want to work with this project on someone, and they might say no. But like sort of forcing yourself to take an action that is going to require somebody else to react either positively or negatively or something. It's then you then have to react to that, and then you're like out of the funk of doing nothing, and you are then like kind of acting and reacting to things as they come at you, which is good. And that first step doesn't have to be great. Like I said, I don't make that much artwork anymore, but I remember like this moment when I was pretty young and I was trying to like first start painting. And I remember making this painting, and as I was making it, I was like, this is a really bad painting. And I knew that it was a bad painting, but I was like, I have to finish this, and I just have to do it, because then I can look at it and be like, I can just go from there. You know what I mean? And like, you never have to show it to anybody, and because it looks like crap, but it's just sort of like, it sort of had to just sort of like be like a first step, like just an experiment to try this. And then I could be like, okay, like the next iteration is going to be better. You know, like, and that was the same kind of thing where it's like, once you sort of like throw that out there, even if it sucks, you then have to react to it. And like, the best thing you can do is like to force yourself to react, because then you have to keep iterating and making stuff better.
I think that is awesome advice, actually. I love that. Taking the first step definitely always initiates some kind of progress, or it helps you learn something about yourself, either through your own reaction or through other people's reaction. So
yeah,
I agree with that advice, and I love it, actually.
well, and the first step can be bad. I think, and I think to give yourself permission for the first step to not be very good, because it's not really where you're going. It's just sort of like, it's just a way to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be the end product. Because I think that's where you get stuck. People get stuck when they want to have everything figured out before anything's out in the world, and it just doesn't work that way.
Yes, I love that. Okay, and one last question to close out the podcast. Tell us your favorite song, or what helps get you through maybe a slow day. I want something that amps you up, or that makes you feel that much more creative.
Oh, my favorite song. It changes day by day. So, you know, the song I played this morning that kind of got me like motivated, I think, was it's this group called Beat Connection, and it's a song called Palace Garden at 4 a.m. So you have to just look it up. I'm not gonna like sing it for you. And it's obscure. Wait, what's that?
5 seconds. Sing 5 seconds.
In 5 seconds?
Sing 5 seconds of the song.
Sing 5 seconds of the song? No, I can't do that. It's yeah, I don't know. It's good. It just has a good beat. It's not even the lyrics. It's like I can't imitate what I find motivating about it, because it really has to do with the rhythm. To that song.
All right, Kevin, tell everybody where they can find you, or where they can find more information about ArtPrize, and if they have any questions, direct them.
Yeah. you can find out more about ArtPrize just at artprize.org. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Beist, my name, KevinBuist.
Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the AM show. If you have any questions, reach out to Kevin to learn more about ArtPrize. And thanks, Kevin. We really enjoyed having you.
Thanks. It was fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.